Amos Oz is considered to be the most important author of modern Israel. He was respected not only in Israel, but all over the world. And many times he was nominated to receive the Nobel Prize. He didn't get it. He died 2 years ago of cancer. His name made it to the headlines of the Israeli papers in the past few months because of an autobiography that one of his 3 children, Galia, published. Let me read for you a translation of the opening line of her book. In my childhood, my father beat, cursed, and humiliated me. Amos Oz was not only a wonderful author, he was a humanist. He was a person who fought for peace and social justice, so we were quite shocked. But that was not the end of it, because a short time later, the other 2 children and Oz's wife published their own response to Galia. Quote, "We've known all our lives a very different Amos, a warm and affectionate man who loved his family deeply and gently. He devoted his heart and soul to us. The vast majority of Galia's accusations against Amos squarely contradict our 3 lifetimes of loving memories of him." So reading that and want probably to say, somebody must lying. I was not thinking that because I've met with hundreds of families who had just lost a loved one, and it's not unusual to hear different descriptions of the person who have died. We sometimes remember different people and our own story in different ways. But how can it happen? Dan McAdams from Northwestern University dedicated his career to study our personal stories, or what he calls a narrative identity. Every person over the age of 8 or so has a personal narrative. What does it mean? When we think of our life, we don't just accumulate all the events that happen to us. This is not a coherent history of what we experience. We simply choose the event that makes sense to us, and then we place them together to create a coherent narrative. We have to do it because this is the only way for us to make sense of the world, to understand, as the rabbis say in the Talmud, you must know where you came from and where you are going. So to better understand where we came from, to better understand where we are now and who we are, and to get better direction for the future, we create this kind of a story. A personal story. The most interesting, though, about McAdams and other scholars who studied our personal narratives is they found out that these narratives can be changed. Think about it. We are the authors of the stories we tell about ourselves. So we can go back and edit and change and rewrite and reshape the stories. So it's not that we have a story and it's written in stone. We have the ability to do that. Now, McAdams read thousands of different personal narratives, found out there are different ways to write a personal story, but most people tell their stories in one of 2 ways. One is called a redemptive story. Redemptive stories start with a crisis, with a bad situation, And then we find meaning into it. It helps us to grow and life turn to be positive. So bad turns into good. The other kind of story he calls a contamination story. Things start good and turn to bad. Let's take, for example, 3 sisters, Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. Sarah begins her story telling about the worst time of her life when her young brother Aaron was diagnosed with cancer. It was really horrible. We all feared for him. It was bad for the family. But, she continues, through all this time of going to see him in the hospital and when he came back, I was at awe with the dedication and compassion of the medical team, of these strangers who supported and helped not only my sick brother, but our entire family. And as a young teenager, I knew that that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to help people. And here I am. I'm a pediatric nurse because of that experience. Rebecca begins her story differently. She describes a wonderful, happy family. We always had dinner together, she says. We used to go to movies and vacations until my brother Aaron was diagnosed with cancer and everything collapsed. All I remember since is my parents argue all the time. Money became an issue because of the cost of the treatments and because my parents couldn't work a lot. And worse, I got no attention anymore. Everything was about my sick brother. And I told myself that I will never have a family of my own. I don't want to have sick children. I don't want a commitment to anyone. And this is my life. The third sister told her story without even referring to the illness of Aaron. So Sarah was telling a redemptive story. Things were bad, but I was able to give meaning to the bad, to see the good in people, and just wanted to be like these people. And this is who I am now, a nurse, a compassionate, caring, loving person. Rebecca was the opposite. Things were good, they collapsed, and they're still bad. My life is bad right now. But as I mentioned, we can change it. We can revise it. We can go back and look at our life. For example, if we have this contaminating story, when our father was a workaholic and all he cared about was work and making more money, and neglected us and never came to important events in our life, we can revisit this story, we can edit. Yes, we cannot change the fact. Father was not there, he was at work all the time, but he might have done it to give us the opportunities that he never had as a child. And our success in life, the fact that we're able to go to the best university, to have a head start, is because of his dedication, of his working so hard to provide for his family. And then we continue with a more positive narrative. But as I was reading McAdams and other people's work on the subject of personal narratives, I had this feeling of déjà vu, that I already know all of that. And then it dawned on me. Judaism has the most powerful and the most famous redemptive story, the Exodus. And we are commanded not only to know the story, which we know, not only to teach it to our children and the next generations, which we do, but as the book of Passover, the Haggadah, tells us, each one of us has to see ourselves personally as if we experienced the Exodus, as if we were slaves in Egypt and were freed and made it eventually to the promised land. This is quite remarkable. we're commanded to take the collective narrative, the national narrative of our people, and turn it into our personal narrative. There are bad things, but they have meaning too, and they will turn into good. That's what we took from the Exodus story. We learned so many things, from the bad and from the good. We learned that there will always be Egypt and pharaohs. It was not only one-time event. And no matter how bad they are, we will prevail. And we learned that the path from Egypt to the promised land always goes through the desert. There's nothing magical, mystical about it. There is suffering. There are challenges. There are big problems we have to overcome. But we can make it into the promised land. And we learned that because we were enslaved and we were oppressed, we always have to side with those who are in need, with the orphans and the widows and the strangers. No wonder that so many Jews are into social justice, no matter what the cause is. It's in our collective and personal DNA. This is our story. How else can you explain that after the Holocaust, we lost 1/3 of our people in few years, and we bounced back? This is who we are. And it's not only the Exodus. Think about the Zionist story. Starts with the pogroms in Russia, with Kishinev and others. They hated us. They persecuted us. And then we looked at Western Europe, and despite the emancipation and the Enlightenment, they hated us too. So we realized we have to go to our own land. And it was really difficult. We had to get the land. There were malaria and many other illnesses and swamps. And the indigenous people of the place, the Arabs, they didn't want us. So we had to learn how to cultivate the land, how to build the most powerful army in the region to defend ourselves. And look at us today. And even few symbols that just occurred to me. Now, when we commemorate Yom HaShoah, we call it just Holocaust Memorial Day. But this is not the word. That's not the name in Hebrew. In Israel, we say Yom HaShoah veHagvura, the day of Holocaust and resistance. Because that's the way we are. That's the way we feel, we think. Disaster and immediately resistance, strength, the ability to bounce back. The most somber day in modern Israel is called Yom HaZikaron. This is our Memorial Day in which we remember the soldiers who died during the wars. But there is something remarkable. If you have been there during this time, it's almost unbelievable. Because when Memorial Day, which is a really sad day, all the restaurants are closed, no movies, no music, nothing. The minute it's over in the evening, because that's the Jewish tradition, right? The days begin and ends in the evening. We begin the celebrations of Independence Day, and we all celebrate, and we go to the streets, and we dance, and we do some different things. Bad things, difficult situation, death, wars, rebirth, independence. This is our narrative. I'm happy to hear that the young generation, at least part of it, of the Palestinians in the region, both the Israeli Palestinians and the Palestinians of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, demanding to change their narrative. Because their narrative has been, everything was good, then the Jews came and everything turned bad. They said that didn't lead us anywhere. We have to go back and revisit our narrative and to rewrite it It's our story. The old story didn't work out well for us. When we say tshuva, the word in Hebrew, we normally translate it in our heads to repentance. We think of all the bad things we did last year, we ask God to forgive us, and we move on. But that is only a fraction of the real meaning of tshuva. The word tshuva in Hebrew comes from the root of shin vav bet, which means to go back, to return. And I want to encourage you this year to go back to your personal narratives. Take your time, reflect on it, get to know it, get to know the story that you tell about yourself. Get to know the story that if you want new people, strangers, to know who you are, that's exactly what you tell them. And if you recognize in your own personal stories events that hold you back from being the person you could be, for living the life that you deserve to live, go back and edit it. It's your story. It's not only that you're allowed to, you want to do it to have more meaningful life, a sense of agency, that we are in control of what's happening to us. Let's do tshuva this year in this sense. Let's revise our narrative identity. Let's identify the events or the interpretation of the events that hold us back. Rewrite them. And we will have a more meaningful and happy year. Shana Tova et Gmar Chatima Tova.